Welcome back to Strange Form. Today, we are going to be looking at the VALAVERSE Action Force Mystery Box B. Currently, Bobby Vala is offering 4 different mystery box assortments, and honestly, these are an incredible deal for someone just looking to jump into the line, as you're going to get a large assortment of current figures and accessories, along with the chance to score an older out-of-production figure. At under half of what you would pay for the figures individually, each box comes jam-packed with an assortment of semi-randomized figures and accessories. I say semi-randomized because there are only so many in-stock items available to pull from. Box A coming in at $75 and consisting of 1 deluxe figure, 2 core figures, 2 gear, head, or hands packs, 2 weapons packs, and 1 mail-away figure. Plus, it seems every pack will come with a carded 3-inch desert rat figure, as well as a loose version of the same. But it's Box B where the real deal is to be had, which consists of 2 deluxe figures. You get 4 core figures. Third, you'll get 3 gear, head or hands packs, and 2 of their weapons boxes. And lastly, a mail-away figure, which appears to be either Covert Ops Condor or the white suit version of Pandora. And of course, the carded and loose 3-inch desert rat. And it's all of that for only $139, considering that the core figures in the mail-away retail for about $30 a pop, and the deluxe figure retails for about $44, and the accessory boxes alone are about $12 each. This is a little over a $160 savings. On top of the mystery box A and B, you can also get a plus version of each that comes with a random Vanguard in either clean or dirty gray, tan, or the elusive breast cancer awareness pink. Now, those who have been watching the channel for a while have probably seen my hour-long in-depth look at the Action Force arsenal, but other than snagging Sergeant Slaughter for about $10 several years ago, I haven't really jumped into the line. As for me, it doesn't really hold the nostalgic value that the G.I. Joe figures do, which is something we are going to talk about in a moment. Now, I've seen enough people post their mystery box hauls to know pretty much what I'm going to be getting in this. The biggest surprise will probably be the 4 core figures, so let's have a look. First off, we have the Weapons Pack Foxtrot, which I already have, so I will put this one away for some future project. We have the mail-away Covert Ops Condor, and this box I'm assuming is the 3-inch Desert Rat combo. I'm guessing due to the fact that this one wasn't really part of any larger 3 3/4 line, and it was more of a one-off figure with limited community familiarity with the character, I think that it became a peg warmer, and thus they're throwing them in every box. Next, we have the first of the deluxe figures, which is the Sniper Blowback package, one of the 2 we will be looking at the end of this video. As for the second deluxe figure, we have the Swarm Tracer, which is a neat glow-in-the-dark sci-fi character inexplicably armed with a civilian version of the Chris Vector. Next, for our first gear pack, we have the Arctic Sniper set, which basically comes with the ghillie suit and Remington M24 sniper rifle and spotter that can be stowed in a gun case. The next gear package is the Eclipse alternate head sculpt and vest. If you want to know more about the weapons in this one, watch my Every VALAVERSE Weapon Identified video. One of them is actually a BB gun. Lastly, for the accessories, we have the Head Pack Alpha. I'm still hoping that they do a Head Pack Beta with several of the female head sculpts. In the bottom here, we have the second weapons pack, which is Hotel, the refreshing Winter Mint weapons pack. Now for the 4 core figures. First up, we have the Desert Steel Brigade. I like this figure, but one thing a lot of the new figures are missing is backpacks. I wish they would at least do a reissue of the backpack gear set. Next, we have another Series 4 figure, which is Desert Condor. After that, we have the Series 5 Trigger re-release, and I'm actually quite pleased to get this one, as he is one that's been on my radar, because he fits nicely with the Joes. Finally, we have the Breast Cancer Awareness Female Steel Brigade figure. I probably won't end up hanging on to this one, and will most likely trade it for something else down the line. So if anybody out there wants to trade for this, the Head Pack, and the Foxtrot Weapons Pack, let me know and I'll feature the trade on the channel. So with everything out, let's look a little more in depth at each of these, starting with the Retro 3 3/4 Desert Rat. This is a strange one for many collectors, as a few of you might know this person as Tony Roberts, the host of the YouTube channel Analog Toys. He has been a huge Action Force fan, as well as a real-life member of the British Special Forces, so Bobby Vala folded his likeness and codename into a figure from Wave 2 of the Action Force line, and later decided to do a commemorative 3 3/4 figure. I'm not sure if the signature is real or a stamp, but the presentation is a neat little aside. However, if you want to know more about the person who inspired this figure, go over and check out Analog Toys. The channel is pretty entertaining, and Tony definitely has an interesting perspective on these figures figures, as well as many others. As for me, this isn't something I have much purpose for, so it's probably going to go in a bin somewhere. Now, if it had been the standard 1/12 Desert Rat figure, I would have been a lot more excited. Next we have Blowback. Honestly, this figure runs circles around the G.I. Joe 60th Anniversary Sniper, and I plan on displaying the two together as a shooter and spotter team. Like I said, I'm quite pleased to get this one, as with shipping it runs around $50 alone. And as you can see here, the Arctic accessory pack comes with the same sniper kit and ghillie suit. I plan on using this on an upcoming Cobra Arctic Trooper custom. Here we also have the Hotel Weapons Pack, which comes with a Barrett sniper rifle, as well as a Topanga machete, an AK-74, a Breech Desert Eagle, and an open chamber Heckler & Koch VP9, an open slide Colt 1911, an open slide Silencer Co. Maxim 9, and a Brugger & Tomet 9mm submachine gun, as well as a Chris Vector air rifle and a DPMS BB gun. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the Swarm Tracer design. I really like the fact that it comes with several heads, and the overall design is a lot of fun, but it doesn't fit with the sort of grounded military look of the heroes, and I can't help but think of the henchmen from Venture Bros every time I look at those wings. And giving the jetpack a little B-tail might have been the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to the cool versus silly factor. Next, we have Headpack Alpha. Like I said before, this is a double for me, but I really do like the fact that Action Force included accessory packs like these. Again, I'd very much like to see a re-release of the backpack set and maybe a Headpack Beta with some of the female head sculpts. Now, Weapons Pack Hotel has largely been a peg warmer for two specific reasons. One is that it doesn't come with a single weapon that can't be found in any of the previous packs. I.e. the sculpts are all items that we've gotten before, just cast in white and pastel mint green, and I think that's the second reason these didn't fly off the shelves. That the colorway for them wasn't all that interesting, and the pastel accents didn't really work as well as white weapons with some black accents would. But it's nice to have received this with the Arctic Sniper set. Like I said before, I'm going to be doing a couple of Arctic Cobra Trooper customs and filming them out in the Massachusetts snow for a future episode. As for the Eclipse gear pack, I'm not terribly fond of any of the weapons, but I do really like the extra head sculpt and the alternate vest. Here we have the Series 4 Desert Steel Brigade figure. Other than different color variations, the Steel Brigade figures haven't really changed much since the first wave. I'm not really a huge fan of the slim dirt bike helmet face, so I'll most likely be changing out the head. But what I will say about these is that they make amazing kit bash custom fodder, and that is really a large part of the market that VALAVERSE has unwittingly catered to. This is also something I'll be talking about a little more later in the pose montage. Here we have the Breast Cancer Awareness Female Steel Brigade figure. Again, this is basically a repaint of the previously released female Steel Brigade figure, but in an outfit that can be seen from space. I don't think this woman is going to have to worry about cancer, as a bullet is most likely going to take her Dayglow butt down first, unless she's part of a tactical response team to a hostage situation at the Barbie headquarters. I get that this and the pink SUV are mostly for charity purposes, but it doesn't make them any less silly to look at. I can't wait for the prostate cancer awareness version, complete with pointer finger rectal exam accessory. But all jest aside, the figure was for a good cause. I just wish it did dual duty as a usable soldier figure, maybe with a pink ribbon as a piece of deco on the helmet and the breastplate rather than a full pink outfit. Next, the re-release of Trigger on a card back rather than the window box packaging. A figure that initially came in the Series 2 release and is a popular straight military design. No fantasy elements, just a heavy gunner. I'll take a minute right here to say that I'm not a big fan of the new card back packaging. It's not really collector friendly, and it doesn't really hold the same nostalgic value that the art cards for the retro G.I. Joe figures do. I know it's probably cheaper than the window box design, but it was definitely nice to be able to put figures back in their packaging for easy storage. So personally, I would prefer the box version, but I guess this pushes collectors to buy two, as they will have to have two in order to keep one box pristine. Lastly, we have the Desert Condor from Series 4. This is another classic military figure, and these are the kinds of figures that Hasbro should be doing for their 60th anniversary line. This is where I would like to see VALAVERSE maybe branch out and do some World War I and II and maybe Vietnam-style British and US forces costumes and weapons. It would be an excellent subline to release, maybe 1 or 2 core deluxe figures per year. And I really guarantee you that these would fly off the shelves. A World War II US infantryman with Thompson and M1 Garand would be on the top of my list. As for the last item, we have the Covert Ops Condor Mail Away. This is one place I would really like to see Hasbro catch up. The action points are a great way of providing a bit of value on the back end, which is funny because it's an idea that Hasbro originally started. This figure is supposed to be a casual covert operations version of the Condor character, which appears to be a cross between Daniel Craig's James Bond and Chuckles from the G.I. Joe line. I really would have liked to have seen a briefcase and laptop included with this figure, but it's nothing that I can't grab somewhere else. Also, I'm definitely replacing his sidearm with a 1911, which I wish came on a belt holster rather than a leg holster. A tactical leg holster kind of throws off the covert vibe. What's interesting about this figure is that almost 100% of it is redeco rather than any new sculpts. So this really goes to show how far you can take a character design with paint applications alone. Now that we've looked through the box, we are going to take a closer look at Blowback and the Swarm Tracer, as these two will give a good cross-section of what VALAVERSE is currently offering. And stay tuned to hear my thoughts on the company as a whole, the things I think that they're doing right, and the things I think need course correction. Now, the first VALAVERSE figure I'm going to dig into on this channel is Blowback. One of the things being changed by VALAVERSE this year is that the Action Force line will soon get a two-stage neck. And every time I looked at this figure since its release, I was wondering how well he would be able to lay prone with only a single joint at the head. I don't know how well any of you know the backstory and the comic book series that accompany this line, but the series takes place after the fall of the United States and the rise of several small tyrannical governments in a newly formed New Colonia. Yes, the fingerprints of a New Englander are definitely all over this story, i.e. it's about standing up to encroaching tyranny in a neo-colonial America. One issue I have with this is that the story doesn't quite fit the figures, as most of the heroes have fairly standard Gulf War and current military gear, and really don't have the lived-in scavenged look that you would expect the heroes of this type of story to be sporting. Many of the villains, on the other hand, are massively technologically advanced, other than the civilian legal Chris Vector, that is, but unfortunately show a lack of design diversity between different types, only just color changes. This is something that I would like to see the company amend, giving these enemies that push the design aesthetic into the almost alien, more exotic weapons that are as imaginative as the characters themselves. The Praetorian, I think, is a good first step towards this, having an energy weapon sword, but it would have been nice to have seen advanced ballistic weapons as well. It can't be that much in tooling to come up with a few extra fictional weapons designs that can be used across multiple figures. Now I get why the VALAVERSE figures are more expensive than their G.I. Joe counterparts. It's a similar reason to the new Monster Force figures that are also more expensive. Simply put, Hasbro has a much larger audience and is definitely getting scale discounts from their manufacturers. This is unfortunate because it's made it a little more difficult for VALAVERSE to hold on to its corner of the market, as they simply aren't the cheaper option. That being said, this figure has quite a few accessories and really good build quality for the price point, and Mr. Vala definitely deserves praise for producing fairly detailed, non-gummy weapons, many of which have found their way into my G.I. Joe collection. This sniper comes with maybe my favorite weapon they've included thus far, and that's the Remington M24 sniper. And the addition of a case, spotting scope, and two different bipod positions shows an absolute understanding of the platform. My only gripe with this figure is I would have liked a backpack, and maybe a single-point sling that could be plugged into the butt of the H&K M110A1. But other than that, this is a pretty impressive loadout, and I do have a few extra backpacks already. It's just that a camo one would have been cool. Like I said before, hopefully in the near future we can get a re-release of their backpack accessory kit, and maybe a few more with a couple new colorways. Also in the box we have the ghillie suit instruction booklet, but it's a fairly self-explanatory process. I've heard a few complaints about this ghillie suit, but I'm actually really impressed with it. It looks exactly how it should, and I don't understand what people were really looking for in this scale and price point. I like it much better than the Christmas tree garland counterpart that comes with the G.I. Joe 60th anniversary sniper, so again, I don't get the complaints. All told, we have 4 sets of hands, including the ones that come installed, totaling 8 different hand positions, a stand, and the rifle carrying case that houses the rifle and spotting scope, a communication headset, a helmet with either ear guards or built-in communication headphones, a gimmick I really enjoy as it gives quite a bit of play diversity, 3 heads including masked, one eye aiming, and both eyes open, the ghillie suit, and lastly his H&K. It should also be noted that he has a knife, handgun, and 2 extra magazines slotted into his vest and belt. This is about as good as standard sniper in this scale can get, and if you don't like this loadout, you can always augment him with one of the many offerings from Gridiron Studios, or if you really must have him reach out and touch someone, you can throw him the 50 caliber Barrett found in the Foxtrot weapons pack. Now for the Swarm Tracer. Like I mentioned before, I always found the Swarm figures to be one part cool and one part silly, and I'm never quite sure which one of these is winning out. I often get the distinct impression of one of the henchmen from Venture Brothers, especially with the B-tail on the jetpack. There is a lot to like about this figure, especially with the green glow-in-the-dark translucent parts. All in all, I think this might be my favorite color scheme for this particular figure model. I definitely like it more than the red or yellow version. I also think it would have been nice if the wing were just a little larger and maybe on a multi-positional ball joint. But my biggest gripe with this one is that for a teched-out futuristic B-warrior that uses an energy shield and jetpack, the weapon of choice being the civilian legal version of the Chris Vector that has the extended barrel so that it meets SBR laws is beyond a silly choice, and I wish that they had designed something completely new for these characters. I also wish that he came with one or two larger edged weapons to complement the shield. I like the energy weapon that was given to the new Praetorian release in Wave 5, and would really like to see those types of sci-fi fantasy weapons grace all of the Swarm characters going forward. Other than the weapons choice, my main design issue with this one is that I wish it went a little further with the concept, i.e. slightly bigger wings, some blades and sharp edges around the design, and the inclusion of a few edged weapons, besides the CSGO knife at the small of his back. I also wish that there was a clip on the backpack to stow the energy shield while in flight, or during the time he's using two weapons. These tweaks aside, I do actually like the design of this one, and I would like to see a winged Praetorian version with a larger and more exaggerated look, and maybe several exotic weapons. And if you're going to have insect hindquarters on your jetpack, you may as well really push the design, maybe even having a separate clip-on set of legs so that the backpack can be a menace independent of the figure. Like the sniper, we have 8 sets of hands, a civilian legal Chris Vector, an energy shield, a winged jetpack, a glow-in-the-dark display stand, 3 sets of heads, one very Beast Wars Transformers-esque, another that would look at home in the Michael Bay Transformers universe, and a bulbous translucent orb head that would have looked really cool with a barely visible human head inside, but that probably would have also made it much more expensive to tool. It would be fun to take him apart and put some LEDs inside, but I'm not sure if I have time for that project. On his belt, you have a CSGO knife, and in his holster, a Silencer Co. Maxim 9. If you'd like more information about VALAVERSE's enormous arsenal, please watch my hour-long rundown on every weapon design they've produced. Now, as we enter the pose gallery, instead of talking about these figures, I'm going to talk about my feelings about the line overall and the company that produces them. As some of you may know, the line started when ex-Hasbro employee Bobby Valla decided to venture out on his own and create a direct competitor to the G.I. Joe Classified line. Hasbro, having let the license to the name Action Force, the global branding of the G.I. Joe franchise from the 80s and 90s, lapse, Mr. Valla saw an opportunity to pick up an already recognized brand name in the G.I. Joe community, and not just the Action Force branding, but also the Steel Brigade license as well. From my understanding, this is the reason the G.I. Joe Classified line has had to call their updated versions of the Steel Brigade the Steel Corps, which sounds like a late-night TV ab-crunching device. After a successful Kickstarter campaign, the VALAVERSE Action Force line was born onto the market. I've been watching this line for a while, and though I really like them overall, I think sometimes Mr. Valla doesn't push his character designs far enough. His hero characters definitely need a bit more variation, many of them often feeling like small tweaks between familiar designs, i.e. many of the designs don't feel like they occupy a unique spot or job in the team overall. But the Action Force line has a small but very avid fan base. I think that Mr. Valla could make a lot of inroads into the larger 1/12 collectors community by putting a little bit more individuality and character into the mix. After having watched many of his YouTube videos, I've come to understand that he really yearns for the nostalgic 80s and 90s toy market. And I get that. But unfortunately, his take on Action Force isn't really a known property. It's Action Force in name alone, but a completely different story. And thus, talking about introducing things like cardboard playsets doesn't really make sense when a good deal of your market is military aficionados and customizers. And strolling through Walmart toy sections and picking up Costco children's toys to articulate points about toys and the market overall maybe misidentifies his collector base. There is no nostalgia to be had because it's a 5 or 6 year old property with very limited availability in the general marketplace. In my region of the US, I can think of only a couple of places I could run out and grab an Action Force figure, and I'm only about an hour-and-a-half drive away from the VALAVERSE HQ. There are a few offerings on Amazon, but no VALAVERSE storefront. Big Bad Toy Store carries them, but Entertainment Earth does not. eBay and his own site being the biggest purveyors of the line overall. And in brick-and-mortar stores, the only place in the area I can ever remember having seen them is Toy Vault. So I would hazard to guess that the lion's share of the collectors are actually getting them straight from the VALAVERSE website or from Big Bad Toy Store, a company that recently became a direct competitor after having introduced their highly successful Monster Force line, a line that quickly created fans in the collector community by partnering with cult favorites Fresh Monkey Fiction and Gridiron Studios. But eventually Big Bad will also run into their own problems because they're the only purveyors of the figures. Meanwhile, Bobby Vela seems like a man intent on going it alone. And this, I think, is a mistake, as the line has stagnated a bit over the last 2 years. He really should leverage the success he's had with the line and grow the idea by taking on a few more creative art directors to bounce ideas off of. I may be reading this wrong, but it really does seem like 90% of the designs are coming from him, and I think he'd do a lot better if he was bouncing ideas off of someone. One thing I've noticed about Mr. Vela, again after watching many of his YouTube videos, is that even though he's very talented and creative, he has a hard time reading the market. I think that's because his philosophy of collecting is a little bit in conflict with the product he's producing. He appears to love the children's toy market, he himself collecting largely out of nostalgia with lines like the old Playmates Dick Tracy figures and vintage Star Wars items. I think this is where a good art team bringing him outside designs and ideas might help steer the ship more squarely at the adult collector's market that align with a woman who has traumatically inflicted facial scars, bloodied variants, and characters throwing middle fingers solicits. Hasbro has currently slowed production of their classified line, so this would be an excellent time for VALAVERSE to reinvigorate its fan base and extend its influence over the 1/12 market. In his episode about the viability of 1/12 scale vehicles, Vala asks the audience if this is something that they really want. But this is not really a difficult answer, as if it wasn't, the items wouldn't consistently sell out, despite their high price points and physical footprint. The only reason that the Action Force's own 1/12 Vanguard didn't immediately sell out is that at nearly $200 in hand, it felt a little more like a toy than other expensive vehicles on the market did. On top of that, it was a fairly pedestrian-looking SUV rather than something more exotic or overtly militant. I guarantee a Humvee would have sold circles around the Vanguard. But I'm guessing the Vanguard's license was cheaper to procure. Now, sales for the Vanguard really only started to pick up when he announced the upgrade kit that allows for you to make the thing look a little more road warrior and a little less soccer mom. In that episode, his read on the market was that a lot of collectors were abandoning 3-inch lines in favor of the larger 6-inch figures, but may not have room for the accompanying vehicles. The fact of the matter is, collectors didn't suddenly start upscaling from 3 3/4 figures, as over the last 10 years, there really have been precious few on the market, the most notable being the offerings from Star Wars, which have been outperformed by their 6-inch counterparts, Hiya Toys and the, of course, very expensive Joy Toys figures being the other end of the market. But for the most part, since the economic downturn, collectors have largely started scaling down their collections from 1/6 scale. In other words, these are in fact the space and money-saving alternatives. For the price of one Hot Toys figure, you can grab 12 G.I. Joes, or Marvel Legends, or in his case, Action Force figures. And if there's one thing collectors love, it's large diorama pieces to display their figures around. So the market is in fact hungry for interesting vehicles at that scale. But for Vala to capitalize on that market, he definitely has to push harder on the cool factor. Case in point, the Swarm vehicle that's upcoming looks more like a designer computer case than an aggressive flying attack vehicle, and the thing is not going to escape comparison to the Dune Ornithopter. In order to compete with the likes of the Dragonfly or Rattler, the wings need to be larger, the tail needs to be longer, and the weapons definitely need to look more aggressive. I understand that all we are seeing is a prototype, but it doesn't have the mean profile of an adult collectible, looking instead more at home in an early 1990s KB Toys aisle, i.e. it has the sort of squat cartoonish profile and design aesthetic that was often implemented in children's toys to make them less fragile. I don't really see a lot of 30 to 50-year-old men pretending to fly these things around the yard, so I think it's safe to actually make them just a little more fragile and intricate. In another episode of Mr. Vala's YouTube channel, he spoke about his displeasure with customizers, and this to me felt really tone-deaf to just how much of his audience are doing just that with the figures. This is a company that really made its bones around customizers, and if they didn't know this, they wouldn't be releasing as many accessory packs as they do. As a matter of fact, I would say after spending a little bit of time on the fan community web boards and Facebook forums, very few of them seem to have any firm grasp of the VALAVERSE as it pertains to a world-building storyline. Action Force collectors have a light grasp on some of the characters, but are mostly living in their own fantasy storylines when it comes to displaying, photographing, and posing these figures. I think this is because many of the figures are very generic military characters, and that the comic book series servicing the line is actually sort of hard to find. So this isn't a well-known property with a cartoon tie-in series and hundreds of issues of comics across multiple decades, the likes of G.I. Joe or Transformers, but instead is something new and only lightly developed. Though the entire comic book series should be available for digital purchase on the VALAVERSE website, there is a link to purchase the comic series on Amazon. But it's missing the newest 3 issues, and honestly, at only 8 issues since the toys hit the Kickstarter, the comic book and general story feel a little more like an afterthought rather than the bedrock that the series is based on. And prior to this review, I went out and read all 8 issues of the comic as well as the short novella. The comics are very loosely strung together and are mostly extended character bios rather than a cohesive narrative storyline. This story is a cross between the TV show Jericho and A24's Civil War, except with villains that dress up as bugs, wear Spartan helmets, or bone masks. In the comics, there's very little action, and most of the pages consist of characters speaking with each other in a very expositionary manner regarding their characters' motivations. So it doesn't commit to either being a ruckus fun military shoot-'em-up or a thoughtful conversation about the fractured political divide. And like I said before, each issue is more of an extended character dossier with very little connective story tissue. If Vala really wants people to respect the property and characters outside of customization and army building for their G.I. Joe sets, he really needs to lean more heavily on the storytelling aspect. Without this, people are going to create their own stories. My advice to amend this would be to create YouTube podcast series that tells tales from the front lines of the Action Force world. Also, be more consistent and linear with the comic books and create a storytelling Bible with canonical aspects to make sure that the characters feel more like a progression of the world than hip-shot cliches such as the samurai mask-wearing figure. Then at least you would have a story running congruent with your product releases. Also, this is just an aside, but the website really should have a proper catalog of previously released figures and comic books. The VALAVERSE website, which is sort of a mess, only has Series 1 of the figures archived, and we are of course right now on Series 5. I had to scour the net in order to see what figures have come before and when they were released, and it took more than a minute to figure out where all of the comic books were and how the story had been cobbled together to this point. Now all of this seems like I'm just complaining to complain, and that's not actually true at all. I really enjoy this line and think that there's a lot of room to expand this universe, as well as its influence on the market. Take Fresh Monkey Fiction and Big Bad Toy Store's collaboration in the Monster Force line. This line largely gets a free pass in the world-building department because they are stringing together properties we already know: Van Helsing, Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, and so on. These are well-known characters with well-known tropes, and thus there's some built-in audience literacy. But a good deal of the sudden success of this line was due to the uniqueness of the character design and accessories. But after having said all of that, I will say that after having played with many of these, their true strength really is in the mix and matchability of the costumes, weapons, and accessories. I encourage anyone out there to pick up a handful of these and a few accessory packs and play around with them for an afternoon. There's definitely an addictiveness to how much you can personalize these. G.I. Joe classified figures are really insulary, and the accessories that come with them are very character-based and really to be used with that figure in specific, with mix and match heads, hands, vests, belts, legs, straps, holsters, weapons, backpacks, and even arms and legs and torsos if you heat the figures up. There's an endless stream of possibilities, making these some of the most versatile military figures on the market. Yes, I would like to see some more role specialist-specific diversity in the character design going forward, but some of the new reveals suggest that that's exactly what's happening. The new Chrome Steel Brigade figures have several new design elements that look incredible, and Vala has teased a rocket launcher accessory among other things, so we may be getting specialists. This, coupled with an attempt at shaking things up character-wise with Season 5, showed that the line is actively evolving away from simply re-releasing variants of the exact same figure. I realize that the new series is basically the A-Team, but that is a major diversion from just standard military guy, and this particular team does feel more at home in a modern Civil War environment. Knowing things are evolving and changing, here is my personal wish list for the franchise in the future. Number 1, start working on proper canon and releasing connective stories that tie the characters and world together a little bit better than simple one-offs. The cheapest way to do this up front would be podcast-style stories. My gravelly voice is always available, but seriously, this would not be a bad way to convey story beats regarding upcoming characters, especially if you also had some artwork and product shots as visuals. One a month would probably be good. Number 2, give us some more extreme enemy designs and push the envelope when it comes to exotic accessories, especially when it comes to the Swarm's weaponry, i.e. imagine and create items and weapons never before seen with a consistent design philosophy. Number 3, give us more specialists with unique accessories like medkits and communications gear, as well as tools to flesh out the heroes. Remember, in a toy line, tropes are a good thing. Medics, bomb specialists, and mechanics would be a great start, just to name a few. Number 4, consider smaller vehicles such as snowmobiles, dirt bikes, small drones, and other fun mid-sized standalone accessories. These will be much cheaper to develop than larger vehicles and will have cross-pollination with other 12-inch lines. Don't let Gridiron and Littlest Armory corner the market. Number 5, recognize that the franchise is aimed almost solely at an adult market, being sure to ramp up the cool factor and not worry as much about playability and more about posability, as a lot of these are going to be centerpieces for photo shoots or just posed and put on the shelf. Number 6, beat Hasbro to the punch and branch out into some historically accurate World War I, II, and Vietnam era deluxe Allied Forces military figures. I guarantee that these would fly off the shelves and solicit a new market. These bucks could also be used for many other figures. Number 7, stop using airsoft weapons as a jumping off point for design models, opting instead for real military use weapons, as well as unique fantasy items for the more teched out characters. Number 8, and this may just be me, but more backpacks, especially ones that can stow accessories. The ability to put a shovel, tomahawk, or rifle on a backpack is actually really useful for posing. Number 9, and if you're resigned to doing larger sets, like a giant mech, shoot for something more RoboCop than 80s cartoon. A cross between Kane from RoboCop 2 and the Power Loader from Aliens would be ideal. The company that has been hitting this one out of the market right now is Joy Toys, so they would be the best ones to take design cues from. 10. Lastly, encourage a think tank style approach to character design. Again, I only know as much about the company's process as has been stated on the YouTube series, but it does seem like 90% of the character design workflow is on Mr. Vala's back, so bouncing ideas off of the staff is never a bad idea, as well as fan outreach questionnaires to nail down the wants of the market. And of course, looking more into what other companies like Fresh Monkey Fiction are doing than the average children-centered brand like Spin Masters. Though G.I. Joe Classified is still quite popular, it barely hangs on to its place on the toy aisles of Walmart or Target, with many of them having dropped it completely, with Hasbro slowly coming to the realization that they are catering almost exclusively to an adult G.I. Joe collector's market. If Action Force is to succeed, it's going to be with the same market demographic, snatching up Monster Force, Mezco, Diamond Select, and Classified figures, i.e. the Army, Sci-Fi, and Horror guys. There are going to be some Marvel collectors, some Spawn guys, as well as a few Star Wars guys mixed in, but I've noticed most of the Action Force market is primarily the military and sci-fi collectors. Now let me end this on a positive note. There is an extremely aggressive subsection of the 1/12 community who really trashes this line more than it deserves. And one thing I've noticed in watching Mr. Vala speak is that he's the type of person who takes a lot of these complaints to heart. I've known several people very similar to him in my lifetime, and he's the type of guy who tries to get ahead of complaints or apologizes for perceived shortcomings before it can be launched against him. It's a manner of speaking where a person tries to have every side of an argument before simply affirming their position. This is the hallmark of a person who really cares deeply about the product that they're putting out there into the world and the effect it's having on their fan community. I think that sometimes this might cause him to be a little bit risk-averse when it comes to pushing the line into any direction that might disappoint some of the invested fans. And that's endearing, but you also have to be willing to risk disappointing a few people to impress a majority. So overall, I think that this line has a lot of room to grow and is one that's definitely worth checking out, if for no other reason than to have something cool to customize. Looking forward to seeing what this year brings and hoping that the storyline becomes a little more fleshed out as the line progresses. And as an Aliens fan, if somebody ever started producing 1/12 Alien figures other than the one Mezco figure, these would be my go-to for Space Marine army building. Anyway, in conclusion, to those of you who have never heard of this line, I think this serves as a good introduction. There are some positives and some negatives, but overall I think it's something worth looking into. To those of you who know this line, tell me what you think of it in the comments. I will be looking into a few more figures plus the Vanguard in the near future, as well as some of the offerings from Monster Force. And as always, remember, never stop collecting.